a newbie investor should focus on is becoming a great deal finder and analyzing deals.
He runs on a full-time, consistent basis. He runs a wholesaling and a flipping business.
But, there's no salaries, no benefits, just straight commission, which at the time was kind of like a big red flag.
The connections, you never know where they're going to come from. And that's just kind of one thing I want to highlight.
Any guy can go on YouTube, watch all these videos. Oh yeah, let me just tie up a property and see if I can find a new buyer.
A number of different ways you can get into the industry. We talked wholesaling. Some people just come in and do their first single family rental property.
Then they get picked off and they get hired, and then they create their own coaching tree.
Welcome back to the Wealth Juice Podcast. As always, it's your boys, Ryan and Corey here with another episode for you. Today I had a great friend of mine and a budding friend of Ryan's on the show, Phil Bach. Phil is a real estate investor in Tampa. He's originally from Tallahassee area. He went to Florida State. And Phil's become a great friend of mine. I talk about this all the time on our show, how I got a short-term rental in Tampa, Florida, and Phil made this deal happen for me. Connections are truly everything. Phil has about 12 units down in Tampa, but he runs on a full-time, consistent basis. He runs a wholesaling and a flipping business. He does operations in Tampa, Jacksonville, and Daytona. And he's got a great operation down there. It is him and a VA running this business. He's doing like 8 flips at once, wholesaling. I was down there with him and he closed a deal that brought him, let's just say, a really nice chunk of change in one day's work. And he's put just a great system together. He doesn't have to be 50, 100 employees. He's doing it himself. And he's been doing it for 10 years. And I really want people to listen to this episode and say, this is how you bootstrap. Phil is the perfect example of somebody who has been doing something for long enough to become an expert at it. And he lives a great life. He's a great person. He's always willing to help. And I really hope you enjoy this episode because he's become a great friend of mine, and you'll hear it just through the way he talks about business and life and his real estate journey. And he's just a great guy. So without further ado, let's bring in Phil, and I hope you enjoy the episode.
Phil, officially welcome to the show. We are so excited to have you here, man. I think this is a long time coming. Corey and I have had a long-standing relationship with you in the real estate game, and we wanted to showcase your story today, man. So thanks for joining us. We're happy to have you.
Guys, thanks for having me. I feel like I'm standing on the shoulders of giants here. I know you guys have had a lot of really high-profile guys on the show. I know you guys have a good little following, and I feel like I look at those names and I'm like, oh God, how am I gonna compete with that podcast? But no, man, I'm happy to be here. You guys are awesome, and I'm happy to share and kind of, my idea of this is like, I'm happy to share the journey that you don't need to be a huge guy. You don't need to be like I'm just a normal guy, and I don't have 100 employees. I just pretty much have myself, a VA, and it's great to be here.
Phil, imposter syndrome should not be a thing for you, dude. You're doing amazing things. And I will say this, like the point of this episode, and I think we want to highlight that, is like, this is possible for anybody. I think a lot of the big time podcasts and things like that, they get big names on there, people with thousands of units, but at the end of the day, it all starts with one. And the journey, the inception journey, most people can relate to, hey, you just started a couple of years ago or 5-10 years ago, right? And you can show me the way versus me trying to get in a room with someone like Grant Cardone specifically to be like what's step one? And he hasn't been there in so long. So it's harder to relate and like actually give actionable insights and steps to get there. So, dude, we are excited to have you. You're going to drop a ton of gems for us. And it's just a quick conversation about your journey. So I just want you to take it back for us, dude, and talk about the inception of real estate. We were all once in the stage of, hey, like we went to college, we have to figure out what we're going to do with our lives. And for Corey and I, it took a little bit longer to figure out we were going to get into real estate. We did the 9-to-5 grind. And so take us to maybe that stage of your journey where you were just trying to figure out your life and figure out the next steps, and then how real estate played a piece in this puzzle.
Yeah. Basically I kind of fell backwards into everything, which is probably how a lot of people got into real estate. Throughout high school, I just kind of coasted. Things were easy. I went to Florida State. It's the only school I applied to because I grew up a football fan my whole life. Things got a little tougher there. I wasn't really a great student, but I was involved with the fraternity. And, I found out I was trying to study like pre-med and like, science and math and stuff. And I was like, man, not that I couldn't do it, but I found out I enjoyed, socializing and and being involved with fraternity and taking leadership positions and like the recruiting stuff and sales is really kind of where I fit in. I just kind of realized that too late in my college career. So graduation time comes. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to go. Turns out, so my brother-in-law was working in real estate, and he was working for Meridian Trust. It was a large wholesale company in Florida, which is kind of a throwback. But he's like, hey, we have an opening over here. I don't know if you want to come check it out. But there's no salaries, no benefits, just straight commission, which at the time was kind of like a big red flag. Nobody really wanted anything to do with that. This was like 2014, so real estate hadn't really taken off like it has the last several years. So it's funny. I went to go shadow him over Christmas break that year, and it was like I show up to the office. There's like two people there. Nobody's really doing anything. Everyone's wearing like t-shirt and shorts, kind of office vibe. And listening in on his calls. He's calling some old lady in St. Pete wanting to sell her house. She's like, "Oh yeah, I'm looking for like 250 grand." He's like, "Well, I can give you 100." And she politely cussed him out, and he said, "Yeah, that's pretty much the job." So basically, that kind of got the wheels turning, and then he actually pointed me in the direction of Bigger Pockets, which at the time was like this little online forum. It wasn't even anywhere near what it is today. This was like the OG guys back then with Brandon, and I don't remember the other guy's name, but
Dorkin, Josh Dorkin, or
yeah.
He started. He was
with the quick tip. So that really got the wheels turning for me. And then I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, which is the classic. It's like the 10 commandments of real estate investing. It's like that's where I tell everyone to start. Just especially being so young, not really knowing how the business world works. That was super important in helping my mindset kind of change from, hey, let's go work this job, this 9 to 5, whatever. And then it got to the point where I was doing interviews for jobs and I was failing them because they were like, "Oh, what are some of your goals? What do you plan to do outside of work?" I was like, "Well, I really want to get into real estate, and then I can buy houses. Then I don't have to work." And I didn't get called back. And then I was looking back on, it, I was like, "Oh, that's probably why."
So I want to catch people up a little bit, Phil, on like, I want to let you tell the rest of your story, but before we do that, just how we know each other. So I always talk about my property in Tampa on our podcast, and Phil was the reason why I was able to get the property. How like when people meet the significant others of their friend of their girlfriend or whatever, you're like, "Oh God, I got to meet this person." Like people are always like downplaying that. Like my girlfriend is very, very, very close with your now wife. So when we met, like you just never know where connections are going to come from, right? This was a couple years ago now. And Phil is down in Tampa, Florida, and he had, I'm going to butcher your story, so I'll let you share it, but I know you have like 12 rentals now. You have a wholesaling business. You have a flipping business kind of parlayed into one. You're doing multiple deals a month, and he was able to find me a property that I now use as a short-term rental. I can go down and visit him and his wife at any time. So the connections, you never know where they're going to come from. And that's just kind of one thing I want to highlight. I'm curious about, take me from where you were to now, like your business, like, you sucked at these interviews. They realized you wanted to be a real estate investor. Now, fast forward a little bit to like, what is your business? Or you don't have to tell me what it is doing now, but like the next steps, how you started to get into like, oh shit, I'm actually going to do this now.
Yeah. So I've pretty much been doing this now for 10 years, which is crazy. I'm like a dinosaur in this business, honestly. And not to say that there's not people that are older than me, but when I look at who's come and gone in the industry, it is kind of wild. There's people that, I was neck and neck with for several years. I was going head to head with on deals or working with. Now I don't know what they're doing, but they ain't doing this. Now there's people that have only been in the industry for a couple of years, and I see how quickly people can rise and fall. So it is really interesting. And I've kind of learned that, hey, it's a long-term game, man. You can burn out real quick, or, you got to learn to ride the waves. So I started out that first job, like I said, that was like wholesaling for a larger company on a large scale. Worked there for about a year or two, worked for a private investor. was doing county auctions for him. I'd go around with a list of 50 houses, knock on the door, see if anyone was home before he would go bid on them. Then I did some more wholesale with my brother-in-law for another couple of years. And then lately I've been on my own now for the last 6 or 7 years. So like I said, we're focusing on flipping. That's been the bread and butter last couple of years. I do small scale wholesale. I don't like to say that I'm a wholesaler in a sense. It's like, you guys remember Andy Milonakis? Like, I got peas on my head. Don't call me a pea head. It's like, hey, I'll wholesale. We do some wholesale, but we're not strictly wholesalers.
Yeah, it kind of has a bad taste for some people. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's not to say that it is inherently bad. It's just there's so many different people doing it, and that's kind of where our mission is. Like, hey, we want to do things the right way because there's not always a lot of people doing things the right way, especially in wholesale. There's no barrier to entry, so any guy can go on YouTube, watch all these videos. Oh yeah, let me just tie up a property and see if I can find a new buyer. At its core, that's all it is. But that can lead to a lot of messy situations. So, we do a little bit of everything. We do hard money, we do conventional lending. You can't just do one thing, I think, in this market. It's good to do one thing and be really good at it, but it's also good to do a couple different things. And as one kind of fizzles out, then you can focus more on the other. And that's a little bit what we're seeing right now. It's like flipping last year was really tough, especially in Florida, especially in Tampa. For the longest time, Tampa was like the mecca of like wholesale real estate for flippers. It's kind of up there with like Phoenix and Austin. Well, Austin fell off pretty hard. Phoenix, not as up to date with, but I know they're kind of, all these big hot markets are just cooling off. Now it's Tampa's turn. Tampa was on all the lists, top 5, top 10 best markets. Now Zillow just came out with their top 25 best markets, and we're not on it. That's okay. It's cyclical.
Totally. I would like to say this is the first time in 250 episodes that Andy Milonakis has been mentioned on the show, dude. So nice touch. But I did get the reference. That's nice. So what I'm hearing, I'm reading between the lines here, dude. But what's standing out to me is within this game, there's a number of different skill sets you can have, and there's a number of different ways you can get into the industry. We talked wholesaling. Some people just come in and do their first single family rental property. And there's just a ton of ways. You're doing flipping, right, as your active income. And then you also invest in real estate and have a portfolio of 12 units, right? And that's continuing to grow. So you're just almost recycling cash in from one venue into another. One's passive, one's active. I say it should be semi-passive is what I say. But it comes down to this, and I wanted to get your thoughts on this. But for me, reading between the lines here, the number one skill set when people ask me when they want to get into the game, they're like, hey, what can I do to get into real estate? Like, how can I provide value? How can I show that other people that are successful that I am serious about wanting to get into this game? And after doing this for so many years, my personal opinion is becoming an expert deal finder. And I don't know if you agree with this. I want to talk about this, but it is, it's easier to find the money, in my opinion, than going out and to find a great deal. And we've talked about deal analysis personally, like all of us, we've cracked heads on deals, and there's calculators out there. There are a bunch of different platforms that people are using to drill numbers down. But, it comes down to, if you're not comfortable running numbers, you're not going to be comfortable making offers, and then you're never going to get a deal done. So for you who has multiple businesses, and you also, you've done wholesaling, do you agree with, the number one skill set a newbie investor should focus on is becoming a great deal finder and analyzing deals?
100%. If you have the deal, you can find the money. If you can't find the money, you can more or less find a buyer who does have the money. But that is definitely, I would probably say, the most important skill set, because everyone will always tell you your money's made buying the deal. That being said, it's a very difficult skill set to acquire and learn, and it takes a long time. It takes a lot of, I say that, but it's more than just, let's go on Zillow, see what this house is worth. There's so much that goes into it, but that's something you learn with time and experience. And a lot of people will ask, well, what's the best way to get started? My pedigree is, hey, I worked for other people who were really good at it. They taught me what to do. I got paid for my time to bring value to them, finding deals, being a sales guy, being an acquisition guy. And then eventually I had the tools and the knowledge to go and do it on my own. I look at it like, in a football analogy, you look at all the coaches that worked under Nick Saban, they won national championships with him. then they get picked off and they get hired, and then they create their own coaching tree. That's how I look at it. Now,
Love
not
it.
everyone has that access, but that's what I would say is find somebody who's doing it and go work for them. If you can't work for them, or you have a full-time job, find other ways to add value to them. Maybe you work for them part-time, maybe, intern. I don't know, but that's what I've always been the biggest advocate for that. Now, don't get me wrong. There's people that just go balls to the walls day one. There's resources out there that will teach you how to wholesale, teach you how to find deals, but there's a huge capital investment and you don't have somebody to hold your hand going through it. So I look at that as more like the 1% of people who try it actually make it that way. Whereas if you team up with somebody and everyone says, oh, find a mentor. It's more than just pick up the phone and picking somebody's brain. I know a lot of guys, they hate that, they don't want that. They want to see, what can you do to bring me value? In exchange, I'll give you my value, my wisdom, my knowledge. And to me, that's the best way to do it.
So I'm sure this has changed over time for you, Phil, but talk to me about the last couple years, maybe 23, 24, and as we're into 2025. How are you finding deals in today's market? And I know it's been a lot harder, but last time I chatted with you, you were doing, and this was like a month ago, I assume they're not all done. You were doing 7, 8 flips at one time, right? I mean, that takes, you don't jump into this and do 8 flips at one time, right? You do one. But how are you finding these deals like more granularly? Is it sending mailers? Is it cold calling? Is it just connections that you have? I think the audience and just people listening would love to know what somebody who's actively doing deals is doing to find them.
So most of my volume has come from working with other wholesalers. And the rationale behind that is this: they spend a lot of time and a lot of money to find deals, and they're spending more time and more money finding those deals than I am. So my time is better spent just buying directly from these guys. And I couldn't tell you how many different people I've bought from. There's the guys that I know are super trustworthy, super consistent. When this guy puts out deals, I pick up the phone because I know it's going to be good and I know it's going to sell quickly. And then there's guys that I find on Facebook Marketplace, and it's super sketchy and they don't know what they're doing, but they also don't know how good the deal is they had on their hands. And then I've had times where I got completely burned by random people and, went down a whole rabbit hole of issues from it. But more or less, that's my deal flow. I rely on wholesalers. The good ones know what they're doing, and the good ones can make you a lot of money.
Cool. I want to touch on one thing here, and it comes down to the numbers again, right? So we have a lot of aspiring investors or people that have maybe 1 to 3 deals, and they're still hunting, right? They want to become the best that they can at running the numbers and finding deals. Can you talk about the importance of building your buy box and your buy box specifically, and how that's evolved over time? I'm curious, really, just what a good deal looks like to you. And obviously, that has changed over the years, but to give people a frame of reference that are starting out.
Yeah, it's funny because the numbers, just watching how they change and they contract over the years. Back when I started, a good deal was like, you guys know the max allowable offer 70% rule. If we could sell a deal in the wholesale, or the flipper would make a 25-30% net ROI, that's a good deal. Lock it up. Okay, that over the time that went down to 20%. And now the going rate, when you look at different wholesale shops, people that are selling deals at volume, the net worth, the new Westerns, they're selling stuff at like 10-15% net caps, which a little dicey for me, but that's just me. It's not something you can scale on. So what I look for is I'm trying to be all in at or around 80% of the total ARV. So that means is there's a 20% margin left there by the time I've bought the deal, paid all my closing costs, done all the repairs, paid all my backside closing costs when you sell it, paid all my realtor fees. So you have 2 sets of closing costs on every deal. So if I can be all in under 80% of the total resale value, that's a good deal for me.
Got it. So I'm curious how many offers do you feel like you're making in a month's time frame to get these deals? And I realize that it probably differs month to month, right? But like,
Yeah.
if you had to put it into like an average throughout the year of like, okay, I know based on some KPIs that if I look at X amount of properties and I make X amount of offers, I can get X amount of deals. And maybe I know that's like pretty down to the weeds, but I think it helps people that are getting into the game that think I'm going to look at 4 properties and I'm going to get a deal. And that's just how it's going to work. And especially now when you have even people like Ryan and I on the internet talking about real estate, there's so many people out there that are doing this so much more than when you started. It's competition. So I'm curious what that looks like in terms of like, I look at X amount of deals, I make X amount of offers, I get X amount under contract.
Yeah, it's a great question. Honestly, I'd probably get 50 deals sent to me a week, and it's really exhausting and draining. And, it's like my wife will have to pull me away because I'll be like 3 paragraphs deep telling this guy why his deal sucks.
I know you're like scratching your neck, like you're
I'm
kind
like,
of like
what
a
are you
fiend.
thinking? Because there's a lot of that. It's like you got to weed through the garbage if you're going that route. If you're not direct to seller, there's different ways to do it. Like I said, you have wholesalers sending you deals. You're on all these different buyers lists. You have realtors sending you deals, like largely, close to retail price. Or a lot of people, they take the MLS approach where they're, submitting offers on market properties. That's more of like the throw a bunch of stuff at the wall with these lowball offers, see what sticks. So mine, or like I said, the last outlet is we do our direct mail in certain markets, and then we get incoming calls. Hey, we got your letter in the mail. What can you give me? So I'll just start with the email list. I probably spend way too much time doing it, but I'm looking at a lot of deals every week. I'm looking at 25, 50 deals maybe a week. Most of them I can just look at it and glance in 2 seconds. No, it's not really anything special. The other issue is that I'll have 5 people sending me the same deal at different prices. What they call the daisy chain or the astro flipping. So I got to filter through all those, but usually that's like, I don't know, 1 out of every 100 of those that I get sent is actually decent or I'll actually make a move on. And in that capacity, if it's a good deal, like one of my wholesalers, he sends out an email blast and I'll just pick up the phone and he'll send me the contract right away. I don't even look at 90% of the deals that I'm doing right now because
Cool.
it's just, if it's really good and I know the numbers and I can trust who I'm buying it from, boom, then we're good. Send the escrow, close, whatever. So I'm not making as many offers in that respect. It's just, if it's a good deal, I'll buy it, or I'll chip away. Yeah, sure, I'll pay if you can get it down to $20,000 under your asking. Maybe I'll do it. I'm not doing a lot of MLS offers just because I list my own properties on the MLS and I literally get bombarded with offers $100,000 under asking. But as far as here's a good metric: when sellers are calling and you're managing your KPIs and your mailers, I would say successful closing rate is like 3%.
Cool.
You get 100 calls, maybe 20% are take me off your list, not interested. Then you get some that are just like, they're just kicking the tires, want to see maybe what you guys can offer, or they have this delusion that they're going to get, 100,000 more than their house is worth, but it's going to be cash and close quick, stuff like that. I would say over the years, I think 3% is kind of like the baseline. Hey, if we get 100 calls and we can get 3 deals out of it, that's a good mail drop,
Love it. I got a couple for you here. And so we talk about building relationships and the power of, relationship capital, and getting you from A to Z it's traditionally, how do I get there? Right. But now we are of the mantra, having been in this game for a little bit, it's like the who, not how. It's like, who do I need to meet or network with or get around and surround myself with and pull knowledge from to get me from A to B, right? Or A to Z, it should be. And, for a lot of our clients and incoming students, they have a question that they're like, hey, listen, it's hard to find deals on the MLS. Granted, there's still deals out there, but we talk a lot about off market, and a lot of it comes down to relationships. And one of the main things we push and say is like, hey, you need to start building relationships with wholesalers. And from a guy that's in the game, I just wanted to set the stage and ask from you, like, how do you build relationships in the beginning with wholesalers? Meaning, how do you get on their lists? And then from that, how do you vet them out? Because there's a million out there. And you mentioned you get 50 deals a week, right? Maybe more. And you have to vet them out. Like, who do you know who to trust What are you asking them potentially? And like, obviously it's a relationship business. I just need to know how people can weed out the bad if possible. And then how to, really get in the mix with these people on a daily basis.
Yeah, great question. 'Cause it's really hard. It's like finding good contractors is one aspect of it, but you got to find good wholesalers, good realtors, or do it yourself. And most people are not equipped to find deals themselves, starting out. So I have a little bit of a cheat sheet. I mentioned that I worked for that company, Meridian Trust, 10 years ago now, and then they became Property Force. And this was like, they were kind of like pioneering wholesale before, whoever made it big, now it's like everywhere. They kind of pioneered it in Florida, at least. And so I was mentioning that like that Nick Saban built Belichick coaching tree. It was like these two guys who started it. And I'm really close with one of the founders now. They basically started this huge tree of guys learning wholesale real estate. And eventually, most, if not all the guys who were good at it, really all branched off to do their own thing. So I have this network of guys who basically came from the same foundation that I have, doing things the right way, doing things successfully. And all these different wholesalers now are doing deals all throughout Florida, coming from kind of the same tree. And so those are the guys I know I can trust them. I've worked with them. I work for them, so that's a bit of a advantage that I have built in, but that doesn't mean that, these same guys are still selling to normal people. So in terms of where to find these guys, go to the meetups, go to local REA, real estate investor associations. I'm part of a little mastermind here in Tampa, the Elite Investor Mindset Group. They host a huge meetup every quarter, and just about all the big players are going to show up to these events. So that's where you got to go to shake hands, tell people what you're looking for, and that's how you can vet other people too. You meet them at these events. Hey, I met this guy's company over at this event. Can you vouch for them? Have you done deals with them? Have you done business with them? And more often than not, feedback should be good, hopefully. But, it's also the people that are usually out in public and out and about. These guys are also the more reputable guys that will hold themselves accountable too. Sometimes you find these wholesalers out from under a rock. They might have a good deal, but it's like a nightmare transaction, or, they just, there's a lot of sketchy people too.
Yeah. One thing I want to tie here too, just while I'm thinking about it, and then I think Corey has a couple of thoughts here too, but Corey and I were talking about this the other day, and you touched on this way back in the beginning of the episode, but you mentioned fraternity, and I heard you just kind of sneak that in. And Corey and I were talking about this the other day where, we both had separate friend groups in college. And at one point we were drawn to the fraternity, whether it was due to extracurriculars or whatever they had going on, or the networking aspect where, hey, you're more likely to get a job out of school if you join a fraternity. So, and there's a bunch of other benefits too, right? And so I had a bunch of friends who kind of knocked it, and they're like, dude, you're going to go pay for your friends and leave us. And it was like really an impasse that hit me, because this was like the first 2.5 years of college. I had the same friend group. We were doing the same things. And I love those guys. Don't get me wrong. Right. But I just kind of felt this itch. I was like, part of my college experience is like, I want to join a fraternity. Like I see it in the movies and things like that, but there also was the pitch where there's like business fraternities and things like that. And I found one that was kind of a mix of both.
The fraternities in the movies are at Florida State. They're not at Temple, just so you know. Just they're not, but just keep going.
No, trust me. I know. I've a lot of my friends are in the Southern State fraternities. Way different, right? The big houses, all this stuff. Yeah, so different, definitely a different atmosphere in Philadelphia. I'll say the least. But my point here is there's a lot of kids that are getting into college listening to this as well, and I just want to point this out. So you'll have people pull you away from certain things because they have a fear about something or something that they don't want to do, and like they'll try to convince you not to do it. So people were trying to convince me not to do this, right? I ended up meeting Corey and a couple other of his buddies actually in class, and we went to a party together, and so I was like, at one point I had a conversation with Corey. It's funny that this is before we were like true friends and like ended up joining the fraternity, but he basically was just giving me the benefits of it. He's like, this is where I see it going, dude. Like I was going through the same conversations with my friends, and they didn't think we should do it, blah, blah. So fast forward, I got to say, I joined the fraternity, and you end up, air quotes here, paying for your friends, right? And you're investing in a community of like-minded people. And I say this to say that's kind of where we started. Like that was my first jump into paying into something to get around a collective group of people that are searching for more, right? And it allowed me to kind of build that muscle for real life. Now, I get it after college, I end up getting a bunch of different referrals from the fraternity and like people that have worked for certain companies, right? And you more than likely will have an opportunity in a job more so than not being in a fraternity. That's how I viewed it. And I say this to say this has caught up to Corey and I, because now we are in a bunch of different mastermind groups. And you mentioned these local real estate meetup groups and the masterminds. It's so much easier for us to jump into these because we had a great experience going through the motions before and saying like, I understand what it's like to pay to get into a room of people that I want to be like and be around. And a lot of people get stuck on that. And they're like, I can just do it by myself and I can do this. But I found that real estate entrepreneurship altogether is and business creation and all that is like, it's a relationship world, and everything's built on who you know, who's around you, who's motivating you, who's bringing you up with them, because you have this internal battle between yourself every day to like stay motivated, stay disciplined, and find the right lane. We're all just trying to make it. So I say that to say the importance of the fraternity, we haven't really talked about it on the podcast. I personally just wanted to bring it up and see, did you have any parallels from the fraternity life to your business life and the networking that was involved, and potentially like anyone through that kind of help you elevate into this game? Or was that just, hey, a stepping stone and you went through the motions there?
That's a great question. And it's funny, I hadn't really thought about this, but really at its core, a fraternity is just a group of like-minded guys getting together and, chasing the like-minded interests or goals. It's really no different than an adult mastermind. It's no different than these real estate groups. We're all like-minded individuals chasing after the same ideas. The only difference is when you're in college, you're chasing chicks and beer. Well, now we're all chasing houses and wealth and success. So, it's funny. I just kind of put that together. It's like, what? It was a great experience for me. And not just for like the friendship aspects. I mean, like probably 90% of the guys in my bachelor trip were all fraternity guys. I'm putting in an offer today with a buddy in Tampa. He's in my fraternity. We play golf every other weekend. It just opened so many doors. And for me individually, I was never much for like leadership or, in high school, I was just like kind of a slacker on the basketball team. We had this whole thing where like we didn't like the coach, and I was kind of like the ringleader, like, oh, this guy sucks, and everyone rallied behind me. But I was like the anti-leader, I didn't think leadership was cool or anything. But joining the fraternity opened a lot of doors for leadership for me, where I took positions, helping organize events. It felt like running a small business, really. I was like, hey, let's leave this place better than we found it. So I became like the recruitment chair, and in a sense developed sales skills doing that. Hey, join a fraternity. Let's go out. Let's play basketball. Let's go to the bar, whatever. It really enhanced a lot of the skills that I didn't really know I had, or I didn't really bring out prior to joining. And then obviously after college, well, here's another great example. One of my best friends, Billy, he moved to Tampa and he lived across the way from me, and he was working his 9-to-5 job. And he was like, man, this sucks. Like, and then me and one of my best friends, Nick, we were working together. I hired him to come work for the companies I was working for out of college. And Billy saw how much we were having fun and crushing it. He's like, dude, how do I do this? And then we brought him into the fold. So there's 3 guys all from the same fraternity. And then to take it back a step further, my brother-in-law, the Meridian Trust, the 2 founders were at FSU, and one of them was my brother-in-law's fraternity bro, college roommate. So it's all connected, and it's like, that's really, I'm not here to like simp for fraternities, but like in a sense, that's really the power of it when you look at it.
I think it's the fraternity is like the start of it, right? But the networking, the masterminds, and getting around people. And obviously, Ryan and I have a coaching program. We teach people how to buy their first or next rental property. But the easiest way for us to prove that we can do this is that we had people in the beginning that were showing us the way, and it helped us skip so many steps. And I find actually the real estate game, there's a lot of people that are willing to help. And I don't know if it's like that in most industries, but it's like, even when you and I first met, you're like, what are you doing? What am I doing? Like, we had a perfect meshing of like, hey, I'm actually an agent too. I'm a lender. Like, I can help you with this deal. And it's like, it makes the game more fun to me. Like the whole lone wolf mentality. It's like, you have a day and age where you have this computer in your pocket and you can reach billions of people at anytime, why play the game yourself? So I think it's just it makes it more fun. A couple questions for you as we wind down a little bit. I'm wondering, and I don't mean to put you too much on the spot, but I'm wondering if you have any mistakes to avoid or pitfalls or something that you went through that you could prevent somebody else from going through, just by maybe something you overlooked. Is there any mistakes that you would recommend other, new investors stay away from or not do?
It's hard to say. I think in a sense, you have to just make the mistakes before you kind of realize them. Um, Again, going back to working for other people, they can make mistakes for you, and you can kind of, be part of it and not bear the brunt of it financially, if that makes sense. But I think a mistake that I made recently. Oh, I'll tell you a mistake is when I left to go on my own like 6 years ago, and I was with my buddy Nick, my partner. We teamed up, and man, we built up a nice rental portfolio at the time. We probably scooped up 7 like flawlessly executed BRRRs, which was all the rage at the time. It's hard to do that now. It's really hard to do it. Yeah, we picked up 7 properties in like a 2 or 3 year span for start dating back to 2017. First regret is that we sold them in like 2020. They're probably sold them at half of what they'd be valued now. So, kicking myself for that. The other regret or mistake was that we didn't go all in on building a company together. We could have hired, we could have wholesale, we could have done all this stuff, but we were happy as it was. It was easy to find deals. It was even easier to sell deals at the time. There was a hedge fund boom from like 2021 to I started 2019. That kind of dried up in like 2022, 23. We could have done way more. I could be on an island in Bali right now, but instead I'm here. And that's something where I think if we had known how to scale and how to really push things, we could have done that. But at the same time, that's never been my vision. My vision hasn't been to have 50 employees, and that hasn't been to work 100 hours a week. My vision's been like, hey, enjoy what I do, be my own boss. Don't have different things pulling me in every different direction every day. Work for myself, keep myself accountable. And there's different pros and cons to that. I talk to guys that are part of Collective Genius, these big mastermind groups where they run these big wholesale shops. But it's like, you're creating this beast, this machine that you then have to feed every single day. And for some people, you want a private jet or you want all this wealth. Yeah, that's kind of what you got to do. You have to scale, you got to grow, and it's all about revenue. For me, it's been more, hey, I really like what I'm doing, and it's a lot of fun, and yeah, we can live a comfortable life, and yeah, we could always make more money or work harder or something, but we've been happy where we're at. But going back to what I should have done, yeah, I should have bought more houses, or that's a mistake that we made, not going all in at that time, and now things have changed a little bit. So
yeah, I love that you said that. So when I was with you in person, maybe 2 months ago, 3 months ago, at this point, we went out, we grabbed a drink, and we were talking about goals and stuff and like what you wanted to do. And I got a lot of respect for you, man. Like, you built something that is sustainable, and like you don't have so much overhead with your, like you mentioned this, you're like, you have freedom to do what you want with your time. You have a great business that's thriving, and of course you want to grow it. Everyone wants to grow. That's kind of the point of being human in a way, is like to grow, but you don't have to put food on the table for 15 other people, and you can grow a really great, thriving real estate business with you and a VA, and maybe it grows a little bit more for you, right? And you have a couple other people that you need to hire. But I think I want people that are listening to realize that, like, you don't have to build $100 million company for you to see success. Like, I see the way Phil lives. He lives a great life, and you seem happy. And it's like, that's kind of where we want to get to. And it's like, not a lot of people that are in their early 30s, maybe approaching mid at this point, are like, are in that position. They're working for other people. So I think it's awesome, man. I want to say, like, in ways I look up to what you've done. And I think it's just really cool to have done something for 10 years and have something to show for it. And that's the thing that I want to highlight. It's like, of course, nobody wants to sell properties. Like I've never heard somebody say, man, I wish I would have sold more of those rentals. Like, of course you want to hold on to them, but if you do something for 10 years and you stick with it, and you mentioned a lot of people fell off, you're going to get good. And that's just how it works. So I agree. The mistakes are inevitable. And in fact, they're kind of like a rite of passage in a way. And that's, and I know, Rye, you want to add in something here, but that's my take.
Yeah, I have to say, we talk about the 10-year mantra here, right? We've been doing this for 4.5, maybe 5 now. So we're catching up on time, but there's a bunch of different principles here, like the Maxim Gladwell principle of like 10,000 hours into anything and you become a master, right? But that's not really what I want to hit on. What I want to hit on is success is boring, man. And people don't want to hear that. And what I mean by that is it's repeating the same process that's worked over and over and over again, staying consistent with that. And even on the days that you don't want to do it, you have to stay disciplined to keep going. Fixing and flipping houses is not the sexiest thing in the world. Wholesaling houses, not the sexiest thing in the world. But the sexy part is you can make your own schedule. You can go do amazing things with your friends and family. You can take multiple trips to Bali. You don't have to be living there, dude. And so I want to touch on that because there's a lot of people out there that start comparing themselves to others. And what I say, comparison is the thief of joy, right? And like you see social media and the cars and the trips and things. And like someone might've went on one trip and had rented a Lamborghini for a weekend and they post about it all the time. And you feel like they're living that life and in that frame forever. Right. And they're not. And so, every single day us three here are just like, you're just pounding the pavement, man, and getting after it. And like, success is not linear, everything changes. You have a plan and it just goes up, down, left, right. And it's never one of those trajections that you actually plan for. And so we had no idea, truthfully, like where our business would shape out to be starting in day one, and yours is evolved too. And so, you can live in the past and always look at deals that didn't go the right way or partnerships that unfolded, and you can like switch up and like, hey, should we have kept the Bitcoin that we had back in the day? Not that we had a full one, but just throwing that out there. There's things, right? And like things come in cycles, and you can just have to do the best you can. And I think comparing yourselves to others is one of the things that holds people into this like vicious cycle of like regret, doubt, and like fear. And they're like, okay, I don't know what to do. And so you just kind of have to keep powering forward. And that's why I like getting in conversations like this to just go through the motions again and talk through it. Be like, man, we all have just done this thing, right? And like we just continually show up every day. And I think if you just don't stop and you put yourself around the right people and people that you look up to and that are doing cool things, that's where you can really, really do big things. But what I found is the last thing I want to touch on here is what I found after a lot of these conversations and interviews is like people get really good at one thing. And over time, you have to learn through going through the motions of you're going to try shiny object syndrome at some point, because you're going to be like, hey, listen, what I'm doing is cool, but is there something potentially a little bit cooler and that can get me there faster? And you're going to try it. And, maybe it works for some people, but it's either you pivot and it does work, or you pivot and it doesn't work. You go back to what you did before because it was working, right? So my point is, you have to go through the motions with all of these things, and just keeping that mantra or thought in your head of like, just, this is what I've learned from other people. And it's held true for us. It's like, stick to what you're great at, man. And you can get even better at that over time. And it doesn't have to be the most exciting, amazing thing. Obviously there has to be some passion around it to make you continually do this thing day in and day out, but like dangle the carrot and put goals in front of yourself to chase, and then reward yourself for getting those done. Right. Because the lifestyle, a lot of us, you try to build this big business and have money coming in, but what's it for? Like you need to build that life. You need to build your job around your life, not your life around your job, if you will. And so just a lot of thoughts there, but you made me think of this because it seems like you've been doing a very similar thing for a long period of time, but you've only gotten better and better at this over time. And you've put more great people around you to allow you to scale. And you've realized that you don't need or want to scale to this massive level because it's just going to be a bigger undertaking. You're going to have more mouths to feed. There's more problems that come with scale. And then that's how I feel. I never wanted to be this major CEO with 1 million people asking me questions every day and managing the process of the process of the process. Right. It's like, I kind of like the semi lone wolf mentality. And I know we kind of talked about not doing that, but like having a few amazing people around me and taking things down together is way more valuable and exciting to me than having, spreading myself so thin amongst 200 people. So just some food for thought there as I kind of wrap up my thoughts in the episode. But thank you for bringing that up and sharing, sometimes it is more intelligent and more success can be found in doing the same mundane, boring things over and over and over and forcing yourself to just stick to the plan. So
I want to wrap up the show with talking about what are your future goals with your business. Like, so we mentioned you're in a great spot. 2024 was, you mentioned to me as we were talking, it was like, you know, it was a tough year. It's a tough year for a lot of people, like just candidly. It's, you know, I think 2025 in the real estate, you kind of don't really know, but it feels like it's going to be easier to buy deals. So what are your future goals with your real estate business as a whole? And where would you like to see, what would success look like for you if, you know, talking about the end of 2025 or maybe a 1 to 3 year time frame?
That's a great question. So for this year coming up, man, it's been, and to kind of explain what I mean by like 24 was tough. It was like, obviously we know the rates are really high. And what does that mean? It's just economics. Okay. Prices are high. Interest is high. Affordability is low. That just means price it has to come down, you know, until the rates start coming down. So we're seeing, like it's mentioned in Tampa, Tampa now is like, okay, 2 hurricanes later, it's kind of what's going to happen. Things have softened pretty quickly. And you're seeing a lot of people exit the market or shift their strategy. And of course, now over the years, there's always something that pops up. Like last couple of years, creative finance stuff has gone crazy. You know, before that, it was just strictly wholesale flipping. Then it's okay, creative finance. Now people are talking about buying deeds subject to foreclosure or short sale, or you know, there's always some new kind of thing popping up. But I would say, yeah. Well, the bad news is that the market's really difficult right now. I think it's the good news is that what is it? What's the saying from Warren Buffett? Run towards the fire. The people you're going to be running towards the fire while everyone else is exiting the space.
Like be fearful when others are greedy and greedy when others are fearful. That thing.
Right.
Yeah.
So how I'm adjusting my strategy is I don't think the economy, this marketplace right now is conducive towards flipping at scale. And what I mean by that is, you know, it's just have too many properties listed, too many properties are sitting. You just get eaten alive with holding costs, interest, hard money. So what I'm doing is I'm shifting to get back into wholesale more full time. And so what I mean by that is our business basically operates more on the East Coast, like Jacksonville, Daytona, a little bit in Orlando. That's where we're more direct to seller. We spend a lot more marketing. We don't really mess with the Tampa area for that because there's so much competition. Like I said, this is like the mecca of real estate investment. You get people from all over the country trying to get deals here in Tampa. But as those people get weeded out, essentially, that's where we're trying to reestablish ourselves here. So my mantra this year is do a little bit less on the deal volume, but find better deals with more money, deals that aren't going to make you want to jump off a bridge and then you end up not even making any money, you know? So that's kind of, we're being more selective right now. And I think you talk to a lot of different wholesalers, a lot of flippers, everyone's a little more selective right now. And then that's going to trickle back to sellers. Sellers are just going to have to accept that they're going to have to sell their house for a little bit less. They're going to have to sit on the market a little bit longer. So it's an adjustment period. It's a weed out period. And I think it's, in a sense, it's last minute standing for a lot of people. You know, a lot of people that built their business on the backs of the easy hedge fund sales the last couple of years, that is completely dried up now. So you have to get back to the basics. Find good deals. You can't overpay for deals. That's all it is, you know?
Love it, man. When we were talking about this a couple months ago too, like how competitive it is in Tampa, and like really part of your answer is expanding into new markets too, right? Like you're Jacksonville, you've been buying there for a little bit, but going there, Daytona, I haven't heard you talk about Daytona. But I think that knowing that you have a repeatable process in your backyard and knowing you've been in the state of Florida for your whole life, like you can expand your operation elsewhere, especially for wholesaling too, because that can be done virtually and you know the game. So I think it's great, man. I think 2025 is going to be a great year for you. So this is cool. I know we've had a lot of conversations, none on an interview on a podcast, but this was great. I appreciate your time. I really, really, really value our friendship, and I can't wait to see where it goes. So I appreciate you coming on. Thanks again, man. And I think people are really, really going to like this episode.
Yeah, seriously. Thanks for having me. Like I said, man, I hope I'm an example that anybody can do it. You know, I'm not a genius. I think I graduated. I had a 2.7 or something. Nobody wanted me. What's that meme where it's like, who want me? I was like, no, that was me out of college. And look at me now.
Awesome. Appreciate your time, brother.
No, thanks for having me, guys. This is great. Thank you.